Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I don't remember the exact moment my wife stopped being warm with me. It wasn't like a door slamming shut. It was quieter. I used to come home and be met with a kiss, a genuine smile, a look that said I mattered. Now I walk in and get a distracted, "Hey," without even a glance up from her phone. Take last Tuesday. I got home after a long day dealing with a chaotic client rollout. I had flowers in one hand, nothing fancy, just a small bouquet from the deli near the office. I placed them in a vase in the kitchen. She barely looked at them. "Thanks," she muttered, eyes glued to her tablet, legs curled up on the couch. I made us dinner, grilled chicken, garlic rice. The broccoli she once said reminded her of how I cooked when we were dating. She picked at it while scrolling. I asked how her day went. "Busy," she replied, short and flat. I nodded, tried again with, "Did the Henderson event go well?" She blinked like I'd interrupted something and answered without enthusiasm. "Yeah, fine." The chicken sat half-eaten on her plate while I finished mine in silence. After dinner, I cleared the table. She didn't move to help. Just, "I'm going to shower." The door clicked behind her. I stared at the empty wine glass she left on the counter, wondering when I became this invisible. Later that night, I joined her in bed, trying to gently touch her arm. Her body tensed instantly. "I'm tired," she said, pulling the blanket tighter around her shoulders like armor. No eye contact. Just a statement, solid and final. I rolled onto my back, stared up at the ceiling, and said nothing. The next morning, she was already dressed by the time I came into the kitchen. She poured coffee into her travel mug, her hair still damp. "I've got early meetings," she said. No touch. This wasn't new behavior. It had crept in slowly. Over the past few months, I'd watched her invest more in her social media presence than in any conversation we had. She spent evenings in a corner of the living room, wrapped in a blanket, binge-watching shows she never asked if I wanted to see too. Even our dog, Max, seemed to get more affection than I did. She'd curl up with him, stroke his fur, kiss his head, coo at him like a mother with a newborn. I used to joke about it. Now I just watch and say nothing. There was a night when I planned something, just a simple dinner out. She said she had a headache. I offered to reschedule. She waved it off. She wasn't in the mood for public smiling. That phrase stuck with me, as if pretending we were close was something she had to brace herself for. On another evening, I brought up a movie I thought we'd both like. She didn't even look up from her screen. "You can watch it. I've already seen the trailer." That was it. Like trailers were enough to experience a story. I watched the film alone while she disappeared into a bubble bath. When I glanced at her through the half-open bathroom door, she had her headphones in. I was a ghost with no place in her world anymore. We hadn't laughed together in weeks. She used to laugh at everything, at how I danced while cooking, at the stories I told about my coworkers, at the ridiculous impressions I'd do when we watched nature documentaries. Now, if I did any of that, I got a raised eyebrow or a sigh. Once, she even asked, "Why do you always feel the need to be on?" It was the first time I'd felt embarrassed trying to make my wife smile. On Saturday morning, I made pancakes, her favorite, with blueberries and that touch of cinnamon she used to say reminded her of her childhood. She took one bite and said, "I'm not really in the mood for sweet stuff lately." No thank you. No appreciation. She spoke to me like I was a coworker she had to be civil with, not the man she once stayed up all night talking to. I was now just the person who asked if we needed more laundry detergent or whether the car's oil had been changed. Her responses were short, automatic. One evening, I tried something different. I asked her if she'd want to go away for a weekend, maybe that little cabin we used to love. She looked up, eyes blank, and said, "That feels like a lot of effort right now. Can we not make big plans?" Then she went back to whatever video was playing on her phone. I started keeping track, not out of spite, but out of some warped curiosity. How many days in a row would she go without initiating any real conversation? 8. How many times would she reject touch? 5, directly. 3 with excuses. 2 by simply getting up and walking away. The final straw didn't come with fireworks. It came with quiet disappointment. I got home from work a bit early. She was there, curled up on the couch with wine and laughter coming from her phone. I thought maybe she was on a call with one of her friends. I walked in, kissed her on the top of the head. She flinched. "Don't sneak up on me like that." Her tone wasn't angry, just cold. I apologized, sat down, and asked who she was talking to. She shrugged. "Just watching clips." I watched her for a moment. She smiled at the screen, laughed softly at something I couldn't hear. It had been weeks since she'd smiled like that in my direction. That moment, it was brief, maybe 5 seconds, but it hollowed something out of me. That night, as I lay in bed again next to the back she always turned toward me, I stopped trying to pretend that maybe, if I just gave it time, we'd find our rhythm again. The truth was simpler and sharper than I wanted to admit. I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a silent agreement to coexist. And it was only a matter of time before that silence got loud enough to break something. 3 days passed without a word between us beyond the absolute minimum. We spoke only in fragments. Did you pay the electric? Your package came. I'm out of almond milk. If someone had recorded our exchanges and played them back without context, you'd think we were strangers navigating shared chores, not a couple sharing a bed. That Wednesday evening, I walked into the living room just as she was turning off the TV. She looked startled. Hey. I carefully not to sound accusatory. Do you have a minute? She eyed me with the caution of someone expecting a complaint. Still, she nodded and sank back into the couch, folding her arms. I sat down at the far end. I've been thinking, I started. About us. About how distant things feel. I know we've both been busy, I went on. Work's demanding, life gets in the way. But I miss you. I miss us. Her eyes flicked toward me for a second before she looked away again. I want to figure out how we got here. I want to fix it, if you do too. The silence that followed felt stretched thin, like the pause before a glass tips and shatters. Finally, she leaned her head back against the cushion and said, You're putting a lot of pressure on this. I blinked. Pressure? She sighed, as if explaining something obvious. Not everything has to be so intense. Maybe we're just evolving. People change. That's fair, I said carefully. But if we're evolving into roommates, shouldn't we talk about that too? She rolled her eyes, an old gesture that used to be playful, but now felt like dismissal. Look, it's not like I'm saying we're done. I'm here, aren't I? But I don't think we need to force things that aren't working. My heart sank. Like what? She gave a casual shrug, then dropped the words like a stone into still water. Once a month is enough. I stared at her, unsure if I'd heard correctly. Once a month. For intimacy. For everything. We're not teenagers. We don't need to act like every week has to be full of passion. That's not sustainable. Her tone wasn't cruel, but it wasn't kind either. That's what you want? I asked after a long pause. It's what I can manage, she replied, without blinking. I'm tired of feeling like I'm failing just because I don't want to jump into your arms every time you're in the mood for affection. I never asked you to. Didn't you? She interrupted. You keep acting like it's about connection or us, but it's always the same pattern. You try, I withdraw, and then we repeat the whole cycle. I bit the inside of my cheek, choosing my words carefully. I didn't realize affection had become a burden. It's not a burden. It's just not necessary all the time. Once a month is more than a lot of couples get. I nodded slowly, letting her words settle. Okay, my voice even. Once a month it is. She looked surprised. Maybe she expected me to argue, beg, or launch into some wounded monologue. But I didn't. I just stood, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. That night, I climbed into bed, turned away, and let the silence stretch. The next morning, I got up early and left without a word. No reminder that I'd be home late. Over the following week, I mirrored her emotional rhythm with cold precision. I stopped trying. No more shared meals, no casual conversation. If once a month was enough, then that would be my new schedule for everything. I stopped bringing home flowers. No more spontaneous offers to help with her projects or cook her favorite meals. I was polite, civil, but empty. If she asked me something, I answered. But nothing more. The weekend came and went. We existed in parallel, her buried in her phone, me taking long walks, organizing the garage, or sitting out on the balcony with a beer in the evening sky. She didn't ask where I was going or what I was doing. I didn't offer. On Monday, I returned from work to find dinner on the table, takeout containers lined up neatly with 2 plates beside them. I nodded, sat down, and ate without a word. She tried to make small talk, asking how work was. I responded with one-word answers. She reached for my hand at one point. I let her touch it, then gently pulled away to grab my fork. No drama, just simplicity. The next night, she turned up the effort. She wore that soft robe I'd bought her 2 Christmases ago, the one she used to wear when she actually cared about how I looked at her. She sat close. Too close for someone who had just declared our physical connection a monthly affair. I made no comment. She ran her fingers along my forearm as I scrolled through my phone. I looked at her calmly. Something wrong? She blinked, pulled back slightly. No. I just wanted to be near you. I smiled faintly. That's nice. Then I stood up and said I was going to take a shower. The tension was subtle, but it was shifting. I could feel it. Her confidence in our distance had been built on the idea that I'd never actually follow her lead. That I'd keep chasing, keep trying. But now I was quiet, detached. And suddenly, she was the one wondering what I was thinking, where I was going, why the silence no longer felt comfortable. She had drawn a line, and I had chosen to stand on the other side of it, watching her start to regret drawing it at all. The change wasn't immediate, but it was undeniable. It started with the way she watched me. At first, it was subtle, a glance when she thought I wasn't looking, the way her eyes followed me when I stood up from the couch or walked past her in the hallway. She began to linger near me without a reason. She'd fold laundry while I sat on the bed reading, claiming she just wanted to finish it. She'd sit at the kitchen table long after her coffee was cold while I read the news in silence. I didn't react. I answered her questions if she asked any, responded with polite interest if she commented on something mundane. But I offered nothing extra. No jokes. My affection, once abundant, unprovoked, had been dialed down to a trickle she barely recognized anymore. She tried small efforts, one at a time. A new perfume I'd once complimented. A dress she hadn't worn since our vacation to Asheville. One evening, she cooked dinner, an actual meal, not takeout, and placed 2 glasses of wine beside the pasta. I thanked her, ate quietly, cleared my plate, and returned to my book without offering any commentary on the food. Later, she followed me into the bedroom. You've been quiet lately, she said. I looked up. I thought that's what you wanted. She hesitated, clearly thrown off by the simplicity of the answer. I didn't mean for you to shut down. You said once a month was enough, I said calmly. I figured that applied to all forms of closeness. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She turned away, mumbled something about needing to check emails, and left the room. That night, I stayed on my side of the bed while she shifted repeatedly beside me, each motion more restless than the last. The next morning, she made eggs and toast. She sat across from me, sipping her coffee slowly. I scrolled through my phone. You know, she began, trying for casual, Emma says her husband's been sleeping in the guest room for months. They don't even talk. I nodded, not looking up. It's sad, really. She says she feels like she's disappearing in her own house. Sounds familiar, I replied, I still on the screen. That shut her down for the rest of breakfast. 2 days later, I came home from work and found her sitting on the balcony with a bottle of wine, candles lit. The same little setup she used to surprise me with after a long week. I thought we could sit out here. Like old times, she said, trying to sound breezy. I joined her, poured myself a glass, and sat down. The silence was thick, not the comfortable kind we used to share, but the strained silence of someone desperately waiting for the other to bridge the gap. She leaned back in her chair, sipping slowly. I've been thinking about what I said, she offered. I waited. About once a month. I raised an eyebrow, letting her continue. It wasn't fair. I was frustrated. I didn't mean to make it sound like I didn't want you. I nodded slowly, swirling my glass. You didn't sound frustrated. You sounded done. She blinked, caught off guard by the accuracy of the remark. I thought if I drew a line, you'd push back. Fight for it. For me. There it was. I turned my gaze out toward the dark street, where distant car lights flickered past. But why should love be a battlefield? I asked. Why should I have to fight to be wanted in my own home? I took a slow sip, then stood. I'll be in early tomorrow, I said, walking inside. That evening marked a turning point. I could feel her gears shifting. Her attention turned toward reclaiming something she'd so carelessly dismissed. I started finding folded notes in my work bag. Short, apologetic messages. I miss us. Sorry for how I've been. You deserve better than what I've given. The woman who once rationed affection now looked for excuses to touch my arm, brush past me in the hallway, sit beside me when I was watching something. But the worst part, the part she hadn't prepared for, was how little effect it had. My emotional thermostat had cooled, and it wasn't out of spite. It was survival. I had trained myself to be okay without her warmth. Now that she was trying to turn the heat back on, it barely registered. And then came the betrayal. Her sister, Maya, dropped by one evening while I was in the garage. We'd always been cordial, never close. But that night, she hovered in the doorway, hesitant. She's panicking, she said quietly. I wiped my hands on a towel. About what? About you. About the way you're not chasing anymore. I nodded slowly. She's been calling me nonstop. telling me she thinks you're seeing someone else. I'm not, I said plainly. She's scared, Maya added. But also, maybe she needed this. I gave her a look. She used to talk about you like you were furniture. Useful. Predictable. I never said anything, but it bothered me. I didn't answer. She thought you'd never stop giving. Never back away. Never change. And now that I have? I asked. She doesn't know how to deal with it. As Maya left, she hesitated again. She's not a bad person. But maybe she needed to lose your attention to realize its value. I closed the door behind her, the echo of her words hanging in the still air. The next day, my wife made a full breakfast before I even woke up. She brought it to the bedroom, placed the tray beside me like she used to. I thanked her, ate in silence, and headed to the gym without explanation. I'd started spending more time there, extra cardio, longer showers, quiet moments in the sauna. It gave me space to breathe, to exist outside her orbit. And that's where I met Erin. She worked the front desk, bright eyes, subtle smile, no flirtation, just kindness. We started chatting casually. She asked about my work, recommended stretches when I complained about my lower back. There was no intent behind it, but after a few days, I caught myself smiling when I saw her. It felt unfamiliar. Light. At home, my wife was unraveling. She hovered more, asked more questions, offered back rubs, suggested we watch something together. I agreed, then fell asleep halfway through. She sat there beside me, unmoving. The script had flipped. She was the one reaching now, and I was the one weighing whether I wanted to be caught. It was a Thursday night when she finally broke. I was in the kitchen rinsing a plate when I heard her footsteps behind me. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, waiting. I could feel her presence, the charged silence clinging to the air like static. I turned off the tap, set the dish on the drying rack, and faced her. She looked exhausted, but not physically. There was a heaviness in her expression, the kind that comes from too many words swallowed and too many truths postponed. I feel like I don't know you anymore, she said softly. I dried my hands with the towel, nodding slowly. Funny. That's how I felt for months. Her eyes widened, maybe expecting compassion, or at least softness. But I wasn't bitter. I was just done giving comfort to someone who'd rationed it out to me like medicine. I never thought you'd actually change, she said. I tilted my head. You told me once a month was enough. I just adjusted. I didn't mean it like that. I crossed my arms. Then how did you mean it? She opened her mouth, paused, then looked away. I thought if I set boundaries, you'd push past them. That you'd remind me how much I still mattered. I gave a dry laugh. That's not a marriage. That's a game. I know, she said quickly. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was overwhelmed. Everything felt off. I waited. I thought I needed space. I thought if I pulled back, maybe we'd find some kind of reset. But now you're just gone. I stepped aside and leaned on the counter. I'm not gone. I'm just quiet. You told me you wanted less of me. I gave you exactly what you asked for. She reached out to touch my arm. I miss you, she whispered. I nodded. I used to miss you too. Every day. Every night. Especially the nights. Her hand dropped. She swallowed hard. I thought the distance would keep us from resenting each other, she said. It didn't keep me from feeling alone, I replied. It just made me resent the silence. She stepped closer, tentative. Can we start over? I looked at her. And for a moment, I saw the woman I used to adore. But I also saw the version of her who stared at her phone while I tried to connect, who rolled her eyes when I offered affection, who reduced our intimacy to a calendar event. I don't know, I said honestly. That answer seemed to hit harder than anything else I'd said in weeks. Her breath caught. Are you seeing someone? No, I said, and it was the truth. But I've stopped living like someone who's waiting to feel wanted. She blinked rapidly, tears threatening. You said once a month was enough, I continued, voice calm. But what you didn't realize is that you were training me to expect less. And now that I've adjusted, it's not easy to reverse. She looked down at her hands. I was wrong. Maybe, I replied. But apologies don't erase patterns. And this isn't about revenge. I'm not punishing you. I'm just living by the rules you set. We stood there in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. For the first time, I didn't feel desperate for her to understand. I had accepted the space between us, and I had learned to breathe within it. Later that night, as we got into bed, she curled toward me. Not touching, but close enough to feel the warmth. Do you still love me? She asked. I stared at the ceiling. I don't know what that word means right now. She turned away, quietly. The next day, I got to the gym early. Erin was behind the desk, smiling as I checked in. We talked about nothing, weather, traffic, a new coffee shop opening nearby. But it was the ease of it that stood out. No hidden tension. Just two people sharing space without expectation. She offered to show me a stretched ease shoulder tension. I agreed. Her hands were professional, her tone light. But there was an undeniable energy between us, a contrast so sharp I couldn't ignore it. At home, my wife greeted me with her hair down and makeup on. A home-cooked meal sat steaming on the stove. She looked hopeful. "Dinner?" she asked. I nodded. "Smells great." We sat, ate, talked lightly. Afterward, she reached for my hand. "I want to fix this," she said quietly. I looked at her, really studied her. "I think you want to undo the consequences. But you haven't changed." Her face crumbled slightly. "I'm trying." I didn't answer. I stood, thanked her for dinner, and stepped outside for air. The night sky was quiet. My phone buzzed with a message from Aaron. "Found that book you mentioned. Thought of you." Nothing flirtatious. Just simple, intentional attention. I stared at the message for a while before locking my phone. Inside, she was cleaning the dishes, glancing toward the door like she wanted me to return and sit beside her. But I didn't. I was simply measuring her efforts against the months of emptiness she'd given me and finding the scales uneven. She had once decided that my presence should be reduced to once a month. And now, for the first time, she was discovering just how quiet life becomes when someone stops begging to be seen. The final shift didn't arrive with shouting or ultimatums. It was quieter than that, like the final breath a dying machine exhales before it powers down for good. She had tried, in her own way. For weeks, she cooked, cleaned, planned movie nights, and asked questions about my day. But every effort felt like she was following a script she'd written too late. Her gestures came from guilt, not affection. From fear of losing something she assumed would always stay. And though part of me respected her effort, I couldn't forget how easy it had been for her to ration love when she believed I would never leave the table. I had changed, and not out of spite. I had simply discovered peace in my own company. On a rainy Saturday morning, she asked if I'd be willing to go to couples therapy. "I think we need a space to talk without the past weighing us down," she said, eyes hopeful. "I've already been to therapy," I replied. Every day, in silence. Every walk, every night, I slept on the edge of the bed wondering what I did wrong. "That's not fair," she said quickly. "Neither was your apathy," I replied calmly. That day marked the beginning of her unraveling. Not loud or dramatic, just a slow recognition that the gap she had insisted we live with had grown into something she could no longer cross. I started packing a few things, nothing loud or secretive. Just a duffel bag here, a box of books there. When she noticed, she didn't ask where I was going. A week later, I sat her down at the kitchen table. The same one where we'd once shared morning coffee and late-night wine. "I'm not leaving with anger," I said. "I just don't see the point in continuing a performance when the audience left months ago." Tears filled her eyes. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," I said softly. "But meaning nothing doesn't erase the damage. I thought you'd wait for me to come around." I exhaled, the weight of the last few months pressing gently against my chest. "And I did. I waited. But I changed while you were deciding if I mattered." The next morning, I moved out. No shouting, just quiet steps and loaded bags. She stood by the doorway, arms wrapped around herself, eyes red from a night of crying. "Are you seeing someone?" she asked again. "No," I said, "but I've stopped living like I'm invisible." She nodded slowly, biting her lower lip. "Do you still love me?" she whispered. I paused at the threshold, turning to face her one last time. "I don't know. I think I mourned that feeling a long time ago." She nodded, barely. I closed the door gently behind me. I rented a modest apartment not far from work. Small but bright. The silence there wasn't heavy. It was clean, free of the ghost of a relationship held together by guilt and old photographs. Aaron and I continued talking. Still friendly, still innocent. But the difference was, her attention felt genuine. She asked about my thoughts, not just my schedule. Laughed at my jokes without faking it. When I talked, she listened like my words had gravity. We went for coffee once. Nothing romantic. Just two people sharing space. But I left that cafe feeling more seen in 45 minutes than I had in my own home for nearly a year. Back at my apartment, I hung a few pictures. Nothing major. But every frame I placed on the wall felt like reclaiming part of myself. A month passed. Then another. She called once, asked if I wanted to talk. I said I was open to it. We met at a park near where we used to walk Max. She wore the scarf I bought her 2 birthdays ago. Her hands trembled around the paper coffee cup. You look better, she said. Peace suits me, I replied. I miss you, she added, looking down. I miss the version of you that met me halfway, I said honestly. We talked for a while. Nothing resolved. Just shared air, old memories, quiet acknowledgement of what we both lost. Before we parted, she asked, if I hadn't said what I did, if I hadn't pushed you away, would we still be together? I considered it. Maybe. But then again, maybe I'd still be stuck trying to prove I deserve what should have come freely. She nodded slowly. I didn't know I'd miss you until I couldn't reach you anymore. I offered a gentle smile. That's usually how it goes. We left it there. No promises. Just a mutual understanding that not everything broken is meant to be repaired. I walked away feeling lighter. It wasn't revenge. It was freedom, the kind that comes when you stop explaining your worth and start living like it's already known. And somewhere in the background, the woman who once said, once a month is enough, was learning that distance, once created, doesn't always shorten when you're ready to close it. Sometimes, the person on the other side has already moved on.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.